everyone, now we are going to discuss about the liquefaction of helium. Helium was the last gas to be liquefied. All attempts made before 1908 to liquefy helium failed as the critical temperature of helium is minus 268 degrees Celsius. So, it is necessary to cool it below minus 268 degrees Celsius before it could be liquefied. Kamerlingh-Onnes, after systematic study, succeeded in liquefying helium by Joule-Thomson process in the year 1908. He pointed out that the temperature of inversion for helium is minus 240 degrees Celsius and it is possible to cool it below this temperature by means of liquid hydrogen evaporating under reduced pressure. By applying this idea, he developed helium liquefier where helium was pre-cooled to minus 258 degrees Celsius and subjected to Joule-Thomson expansion and obtained liquid helium. Kapitsa in 1934 liquefied helium by modifying Claude method. His liquefier is based on the combined action of adiabatic expansion during external work and Joule-Thomson effect. Here we will discuss both the liquefiers. First one is Kamerlingh-Onnes helium liquefier. Kamerlingh-Onnes helium liquefier is as shown in figure. Pure, dry and pre-cooled helium is compressed to about 40 atmospheric pressure by compressor P. It is then divided into two parts at B. A part flows through the spiral S1 and cooled by liquid hydrogen boiling under reduced pressure. The other part flows through the spiral S2 and cooled by the outgoing helium gas which has suffered Joule-Thomson expansion. Both these streams reunite at C where again they are divided into two parts. A similar process takes place in spiral S3 and S4. So, the two streams are again cooled and meet at D. Here, the gas suffers Joule-Thomson expansion at nozzle N. The expanded gas cools down and rises up. So, it cools the incoming gas. The process continues again and again till the temperature reaches minus 268 degrees Celsius. Now, helium is liquefied. Second one is Kapitsa's helium air liquefier. The most important modification is by Kapitsa was made in expansion engine where no lubricant is used. Actually, all the lubricants become solidified at such low temperatures. He used the compressor when the piston is loosely fitted with the cylinder with a very small clearance. When expansion takes place, a little gas escapes through the clearance. Here, the expansion is so rapid that the escaped part is inappreciable. Kapitsa's liquefier is as shown in figure. Pure and dry helium is compressed to 30 atmospheres by compressor P. A heat of compression is removed by flowing water in a jacket surrounding a portion of the tube. The gas is then pre-cooled by passing it through a bath of liquid nitrogen boiling under reduced pressure. The pre-cooled gas is divided into two parts at A in the heat exchanger. One part passes to the expansion engine E. Due to adiabatic expansion of the gas, it cools to minus 263 degrees Celsius. This cooled gas rises up in the heat exchanger and cools the second part coming towards the nozzle N. The second part is now so cooled that after the expansion at nozzle N, it is liquefied. The liquefied portion is collected in Dewar flask and the remaining part goes back to the compressor through heat exchanger. Next one is adiabatic demagnetization. The lowest temperature near absolute zero can be reached by boiling liquid hydrogen and helium under pressure. K earns attained at temperature of 0.82 Kelvin by evaporating liquid helium under a pressure of 0.013 mm of mercury. The lowest temperature 0.7 Kelvin in this way was reached by Kisum by reducing the pressure on the surface of liquid helium to 0.0036 mm of mercury by extremely powerful pumps. The possibility of still lower temperature was explored by Debye and Guecquie in 1926 independently by adiabatic demagnetization of paramagnetic salts. The principle is as follows. Principle: a paramagnetic substance contains molecules which are lying in disorderly manner. When the substance is magnetized, the molecules are set in the direction of magnetic field. Certain amount of external work is done in this process, which is added to the internal energy of the substance. Due to this fact, the temperature of the substance rises. When a paramagnetic substance already magnetized is suddenly demagnetized, it shows a slight fall in temperature. If the substance is already at a sufficient lower temperature, the fall in temperature is considerable. Method: the apparatus is as shown in figure. The paramagnetic substance is nothing but gadolinium sulfate is suspended in vessel A connected to vacuum pump. The vessel A is surrounded by liquid helium at temperature 1 Kelvin placed in a Dewar flask B. This is again surrounded by another Dewar flask C containing liquid hydrogen. A strong magnetic field is applied to magnetize the paramagnetic salt. The coils M round A are used to measure the temperature by susceptibility measurements. First of all, A is fitted with helium gas so that the paramagnetic substance P comes in near thermal contact of liquid helium and cooled to 1 Kelvin. Now the magnetizing field is switched on. The paramagnetic salt becomes warmed, but the heat flows out through the helium gas into the liquid helium. The temperature of P again falls to 1 Kelvin. After this, helium gas is now pumped out from the vessel A, so that the paramagnetic substance become thermally insulated. The magnetic field is switched off. Due to adiabatic demagnetization of the substance, its temperature falls. The fall in temperature is detected by susceptibility measuring coils. By the above procedure, Guecquie and McDougall reached at a temperature of 0.25 Kelvin. In 1944, White D. Haas, using double sulfate of potassium and aluminium, obtained a temperature of 0.002 Kelvin. Clerk, Stengald and Jorter, using crystals of chromium, aluminium, alum, reached to 0.0014 Kelvin. This temperature is the lowest temperature reached so far. Next is theory. When a paramagnetic substance is magnetized, its molecules try to align in the direction of field and work is done. Let the paramagnetic substance is placed in the magnetic field of magnetic flux density B. Now the intensity of magnetization per gram mole I of the substance changes by dI. So the work done by the field on the substance is BdI. When the substance is demagnetized, the work done by the substance is minus BdI. From first law of thermodynamics, we have dq equals to du plus dw, that is du plus pdv minus bdi. As the demagnetization is carried at a constant pressure, there is no change in volume dV and hence dV equals to 0. Therefore, dQ equals to du minus bdi. But dQ equals to TdS, where ds is the change in entropy. Therefore, TdS equals to du minus bdi. The third Maxwell's thermodynamic relation between entropy and pressure is expressed as dou T by dou P at S equals to dou V by dou S at P. To obtain a similar relation, we by above equation, we substitute minus B for P and I for V. Therefore, dou T by dou B at S equals to minus dou I by dou S at B. This implies dou T by dou B at S equals to minus dou I by dou T at B divided by dou S by dou T at B. If m be the mass of specimen and c be its specific heat at constant field, then dou S by dou T at B equals to 1 by T into dou Q by dou T, that is mCp by T. Substituting these values, we get dou T by dou B at S equals to minus T by mCb into dou I by dou T at B. Therefore, dou T equals to minus T by mCb into dou I by dou T at B into dou B. The above equation gives the falling temperature of the specimen due to adiabatic demagnetization. The susceptibility Xi of the substance is defined as Xi equals to intensity of magnetization of specimen divided by intensity of magnetizing field, that is I by B. The susceptibility of paramagnetic substance does not depend upon the field strength but depends upon temperature. According to Curie's law, the paramagnetic susceptibility Xi of a substance is inversely proportional to the absolute temperature T. That is, Xi is directly proportional to 1 by T, or Xi equals to C by T, where C is constant. Therefore, we can equate I by B equals to C by T, I equals to CB by T. Substituting the value of I in the general equation, we get dou T equals to minus T by mCb into dou by dou T of CB by T into dou B. Let Ti and Tf be the initial and final temperatures of the specimen corresponding to the initial and final magnetic flux densities Bi and Bf. Then Tf minus Ti equals to minus T by mCb into integral of Bi to Bf dou by dou T into Cb by T into dou B. By simplifying, we get Tf minus Ti equals to K by 2CBT into Bf square minus Bi square, where K equals to C by m, called as Curie's constant per unit mass when field is switched off. Then Bf equals to 0. Hence, Tf minus Ti equals to K into Bi square divided by 2CBT. The negative sign in the above equation indicates a fall in temperature in adiabatic demagnetization. Next is working of refrigerator. A machine used for producing low temperature below surrounding and maintaining an enclosure at that temperature is called as refrigerator. Actually, a refrigerator is a Carnot engine working in backward direction. In this case, a certain amount of work is done on the engine which transfers heat from insulated chamber to the environment. Refrigerating machines are of two types. First one is vapor compression machine and second one is vapor absorption machine. Now we'll see the vapor compression machine, which is also called as Frigidaire. A Frigidaire maintains an adiabatic enclosure at a low temperature. The principle involved is the production of low temperature by making a liquid evaporate rapidly under reduced pressure and circulating the evaporating liquid around the enclosure. The liquid which on evaporation produces cooling is called refrigerant. Commonly used refrigerants are ammonia, NH3, sulfur dioxide, SO2, methyl chloride, CH3Cl, Freon, CCl2F2 and so on. In large refrigerating plants, ammonia is used, while in small refrigerators which we are using in our house, sulfur dioxide or freons is used. Properties of an ideal refrigerant. The refrigerant should have low boiling point at a low freezing point. It should be vapor at normal temperature and pressure. It should be non-flammable, non-explosive and should not have bad effect on the stored food material. It should have high thermal conductivity. The latent heat of vaporization of the refrigerant liquid must be large. When a small quantity of liquid evaporates, a large amount of heat is removed and so the cooling will be more. The specific volume should be small in order to reduce the size of compressors. The pressure necessary to liquefy the vapor in condenser coils must not be very large. Otherwise, the apparatus will have to be very robust and heavy. Now we'll see the construction and working. The vapor compression machine is as shown in figure. The refrigerant is compressed by a pump P driven by an electric motor. There are two valves V1 and V2 at the bottom of the compressor pump P. The valve V2 is for suction of low pressure vapor from evaporator E and the valve V1 is for allowing the compressed vapor to let into the condenser C. When the piston of the pump P moves upwards, the pressure in the cylinder falls below the pressure in evaporator E. The valve V2 now opens while the valve V1 remains closed. The low temperature vapor is sucked into cylinder. When the piston is pushed downwards, the pressure of the vapor in cylinder increases and the valve V1 opens while V2 closed. Now the vapor under high pressure enters into the condenser coil C. The condenser coil C is surrounded by enclosure in which cold water is circulating. Here, the heat of compression is removed by the cold water. So, the vapor under high pressure and low temperature liquefies in C. The liquid refrigerant passes through the regulator valve V into the evaporator coil. The regulator valve reduces the pressure of liquid from high valve to low valve. Due to lower pressure, the liquid evaporates in E. We know that evaporation of liquid under reduced pressure is a cooling process. The reason is that when a substance changes from liquid state to vapor state, it is associated with absorption of heat. If this heat is not taken from any external source, the necessary heat for phase change is taken from liquid itself, which therefore cools. If the evaporation is promoted by reducing the pressure on the liquid surface, the cooling is intensified. Here, when the liquid evaporates in E, it exacts latent heat of vaporization from surrounding cold storage space or from the surrounding liquid, say water. As more and more liquid evaporates in evaporator coil, more cooling is produced and the temperature of storage space or surrounding water is lowered. After a certain time, the temperature reaches the desired value. The above cycle is repeated again and again. Second one is vapor absorption machine. The vapor absorption machine is as shown in figure. In this machine, lower pressure ammonia vapor is absorbed by water. In figure G is a generator which contains a solution of ammonia and water. This is heated by a burner. Ammonia gas escapes from water and condenses in the spiral tube of condenser C. The condenser C is cooled by running water. Now liquid ammonia flows into the spiral tube of evaporator E through the valve V. The pressure inside the spiral tube of E is low. The evaporator may be a chamber to be cooled, or it may be surrounded by flowing water. When ammonia evaporates under reduced pressure, the latent heat of vaporization is taken from surrounding chamber or from the water running in this chamber. In this way, the chamber E is cooled. The evaporated ammonia now comes in chamber A, where it is absorbed by water. Here, the solution becomes fairly concentrated. The solution is pumped into generator G by pump P. The cycle is further repeated. In this way, here chamber E is cooled. Next, we are going to see the working of air conditioning machine. The main functioning of an air conditioning machine is to keep the temperature and humidity of air in a room or hall at required comfortable levels. The human body feels comfortable at about 20 degrees Celsius in winter and below 25 degrees Celsius in summer. In addition, the relative humidity of the surroundings must be less than 35% and not more than 75%. To fulfill these requirements, we employ air conditioning. Air conditioning has become a way of life for many of us, and new technology makes these systems lighter, more efficient and more environmentally friendly even ever before. The few basic rules of physics, namely heat transfer, evaporation, condensation and pressure, are used in air conditioning machine. Following are the main parts of an air conditioning machine: thermostat that controls the temperature, hygrostat that controls the humidity of air, control damper that recirculate air and fresh air, filter that absorbs dust from mixed air, cooling and heating system, air blower. An air conditioning machine is as shown in figure. A part of the air from air conditioned room is recirculated. The recirculated air is mixed with the fresh air in mixing chamber. There are filters in the mixing chamber which absorb dust from the mixed air. Now the clean air is preheated by means of pipes in which hot water is passed. This function is performed by preheater in the mixing chamber. This is done because warmer air can absorb more water vapor. Also, in the mixing chamber, a part of air is cooled by the cooler system. The moisture content and temperature of the air merging out from the cooler are adjusted to the desired values by adjusting the temperature of the cooler. The air coming out from the cooler is mixed with the air coming straight from the preheater. Therefore, an air mixture of desired temperature and humidity is obtained. If the humidity is very low, then by means of spray nozzles, water is added to air mixture. By doing so, the temperature is also decreased. To maintain the desired temperature, the air is again passed through a reheater. As a result, we get the air of desired temperature and humidity. The air blower or fan behind the reheater forces the conditioned air through ducts into the room.